Why the jury couldn't believe the evidence they saw. Have you ever been so sure of something, only to have it ripped away in the blink of an eye? That's exactly what happened inside a silent courtroom, where 12 strangers sat face to face with evidence so shocking, so impossible to explain, that some jurors whispered to themselves, "This can't be real." And yet it was. This is the story of a case that defied logic, broke hearts, and left everyone, including the jury, questioning everything they thought they knew about justice. The trial was supposed to be straightforward, a crime of passion. The prosecution claimed the evidence was airtight. They had fingerprints, they had DNA, and they had a motive. But from the very first day, something felt wrong. Jurors noticed details the cameras didn't capture. The defendant, calm, too calm. The victim's family, fractured, some refusing even to make eye contact. And behind it all, a defense team with a chilling kind of confidence. This wasn't just a trial. It was a battle for truth, where every word carried weight, and every silence spoke louder than screams. The prosecution's star exhibit was a single, haunting piece of video footage. It showed a figure, cloaked in shadows, entering the victim's home on the night of the murder. The figure's face was blurred, but their body language familiar. The jury leaned forward. When the prosecutor hit pause, the courtroom froze. There it was, a jacket, distinctive, red, torn at the sleeve. The exact jacket the defendant had been seen wearing just days before. Gasps filled the courtroom. It seemed undeniable. The jury exchanged looks. Some even scribbled "guilty" in their notes. But then, the defense rose, and with one sentence, they shattered the certainty. Ladies and gentlemen, the jacket you see in this video doesn't exist. The defense walked to the evidence table. They held up the defendant's jacket. Same color, same style, but no tear on the sleeve. The room went silent. Experts were called. Forensic analysts debated pixel quality. The prosecution insisted the jacket must have been mended. The defense claimed digital tampering. Day after day, testimony blurred into uncertainty. And slowly, what once looked like undeniable proof started to crumble. Jurors whispered during breaks. One was overheard saying, "If the jacket isn't real, what else isn't real?" Then came the witness, a neighbor, the one person who claimed to have seen the defendant leaving the scene. Her testimony was emotional. Tears ran down her face as she pointed at the accused. "I saw him. I swear I saw him that night." The jury looked shaken. But under cross-examination, the cracks appeared. The defense played a recording, a 911 call made the same night of the murder. The voice on the line? The very same neighbor. Her words were clear. "I didn't see anyone. I just heard noises." The courtroom erupted. The jury sat stunned. Was she lying now, or had she lied then? Either way, the seed of doubt had been planted. Day after day, the evidence piled higher. DNA that matched, but couldn't be placed at the exact time of death. Fingerprints that could be weeks old. A timeline that shifted with every witness called. The prosecution pushed harder. But the harder they pushed, the weaker their case began to look. And through it all, the defendant sat motionless. Eyes cold, face unreadable. Some jurors described it as haunting. Others called it calculated. But one thing was clear. They couldn't decide if they were looking at an innocent man or a monster skilled at hiding in plain sight. It all came down to the final day. The prosecution presented one last piece of evidence, a photograph, taken from the victim's phone, a selfie, timestamped just hours before the murder. And there, reflected faintly in the window behind her, was a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, standing in the darkness, watching. The courtroom gasped. Jurors covered their mouths. The resemblance was uncanny. It looked like the defendant. It had to be the defendant. But then, the defense revealed something chilling. The timestamp on the photo didn't match the phone's internal clock. It was off by nearly 3 hours. Meaning, whoever that figure was, they may have been there long before the crime ever happened. The jurors sat frozen. The evidence was undeniable, and yet completely unreliable. Was it a mistake? A cover-up? Or something darker? Something no one wanted to admit aloud? As the judge dismissed the court for the day, one thought lingered in every juror's mind. If the evidence can't be trusted, how can justice be served? And what they would discover next was far more terrifying than anything they had seen so far. What happens when truth hides in the shadows? When evidence becomes a weapon, and justice hangs by a thread? For the jury in this case, the answer was clear. They couldn't trust what they saw, and yet they still had to decide. Was the defendant guilty of murder? Or was someone else walking free, unseen, untouched, and unpunished? When the trial resumed, tension filled the courtroom. The defense wasted no time. They called in a digital forensics expert, a man whose job was to analyze data hidden inside electronic devices. He showed the jury something chilling. The victim's phone had been accessed after her death. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. Search histories deleted, photos altered, messages erased. It was as if someone had gone in to rewrite her final moments. The jurors exchanged nervous glances. If the phone was tampered with, then the haunting photograph, the one with the shadow in the window, might have been planted all along. Whispers filled the hallways. Who had access to the victim's phone? The answer stunned everyone. A police officer, one of the first on the scene. He admitted under oath that he had unlocked the phone without a warrant. His reason? He claimed it was standard procedure. But the defense pressed harder. Why were timestamps altered? Why were messages missing? The officer shifted in his seat. His voice cracked. I don't know. I can't explain it. The courtroom gasped. The foundation of the prosecution's case, the evidence itself, was now poisoned. And yet, behind the legal chaos, there were human faces. The victim's family, broken, silent. A mother gripping her daughter's photograph so tightly her knuckles turned white. The defendant's family, terrified, ashamed. A father sitting with his head bowed, refusing to look at the jury. 12 strangers sat between them. The weight of life and death pressed on their shoulders. Some jurors confessed later. They prayed silently every night for clarity, because in this trial, truth felt like smoke. It slipped through their fingers no matter how tightly they tried to hold it. The prosecution begged the jury to focus. The DNA was real. The fingerprints were real. And the victim, she deserved justice. But the defense countered with precision. DNA could linger for weeks. Fingerprints proved presence, not murder. And with the phone compromised, how could anyone believe the timeline? The jury waited for one thing. A confession, a slip of the tongue, a single crack in the defendant's mask. But never came. He sat motionless, eyes fixed, never flinching. For some, it was proof of guilt. For others, proof of innocence. Then came the twist no one expected. A new witness, the victim's best friend. She revealed something that turned the case upside down. The victim had been receiving threats, not from the defendant, but from someone else entirely. A business partner, a man with money to lose. A man who, records showed, was in the area the very night of the murder. The courtroom erupted. Why hadn't the prosecution pursued this lead? Why had this man never been called? The jurors sat frozen, because if this was true, then everything they'd been told, everything they had seen, was only half the story. After weeks of testimony, the jury finally withdrew to deliberate. Hours passed, then days. Inside that small room, 12 ordinary people argued, cried, and broke under the pressure. Some clung to the evidence. Others clung to their doubt. But in the end, they had to agree. When they returned to the courtroom, the air was electric. The foreperson rose. The judge asked the question, "How do you find the defendant?" The words hung like a knife in the air. Not guilty. Gasps. Shouts. Silence. The victim's mother collapsed into tears. The defendant's father sobbed uncontrollably. And the jury sat pale and shaken, because even as they delivered the verdict, many still weren't sure what the truth really was. The acquitted man walked free. But freedom is not the same as peace. Reporters swarmed him. The public raged. Online debates split the nation in two. Was justice served or denied? The police reopened the investigation into the victim's business partner. But no new charges were ever filed. The truth remained hidden in shadows. And for the jurors, the case never left them. Some couldn't sleep for weeks. Others avoided the news entirely because they knew they had released a man who might be innocent or might be guilty. In the end, this case wasn't just about one man or even about one victim. It was about something larger, something we often forget. Justice is fragile. It depends on truth, and truth is only as strong as the evidence that protects it. The jury learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes what you see cannot be believed, and sometimes what you don't see is even more dangerous. But in that courtroom, justice was served in the only way the system allowed, with doubt, with fear, and with the courage to admit when certainty is impossible. Because justice isn't about winning. It's about protecting the innocent, even when the guilty may walk free. And that is the burden of a jury. As the final gavel fell, one thought echoed through the nation. What if it were me on trial? Would the jury believe the evidence they saw, or doubt the very system meant to protect me? Because in the end, truth may hide, but justice must still find a way forward. If this story shook you, imagine what's coming next. Hit subscribe. Your discipline is your destiny. Don't let this lesson fade. What would you do in this situation? Comment below.